programs or getting the data from server side, so it requires form. Forms provide the users of alternative way to interact with the web server. So this is one of the way through which you can interact with the web server. Okay, you can get the data from server or you can get the information from the server using this form. So from when I use a term form, it provides much richer mechanism of elements can be included, like text input, password input, optional list, okay, radio and checkbox. I think many of you, when you have done the mini project, if you have observed properly, maybe you have used all these elements in your project. Thing is, maybe if you have noticed, you will come to know. Otherwise, so you just go back and check it. So text box, normal. These are the normal elements that are used to design the forms. Okay, option list, radio button, and checkboxes. So including this, the form provides some more richer elements that can be included in the form to design the web pages. So compared to HTML and HTML5, HTML, the different version. Okay, so when you compare HTML and HTML5, so HTML5, it is added more new controls. Okay, so more number of new controls are added in the HTML5 and also more customized controls. So whatever, these are all called controls. Okay, so this can also be customized in HTML5. So normally, what are the things you are going to do in the form? So users, you are going to enter the text. Okay, enter the text or choose an item, choosing item from the list, or there may be a click button. So these are the different elements maybe you observed that is used in the form. So that is program running on the server will take the input from HTML form. Okay, so consider this is the client system and this is where the server is existing. So now from the client machine, it is going to accept all these inputs. Once you click on click button, what happens is, so there is a server program. So in the form, you need to specify the server side program. Okay, so what exactly it is going to do with these values or the information. And once you click on submit or click button, what happens is, so whatever the data you entered in this form, either it is stored in the database or interact with the external web services. So this is the normal operations that takes place with respect to the form data. So this is when you click on the data, so the data is going to the web server. So in the web server, it can make use of this data either to store or to interact with the external web. Okay, and this is a simple structure. Okay, there are so many options are added. So it contains so many other control elements. We'll be discussing those elements in detail later. So this is a form tag. Okay, when you want to create any dynamic pages, so form tag is must in your HTML. So form tag, and here we have a method, two attributes are there. So I will explain those methods in detail. One is called method. These are all attributes, and another one is action. So action attribute, it is going to specify what type of server program it is going to, or which server program it is going to execute. So that is where the server side script is written. So this data is taken and that is processed by this server side program. So, and within this form, you can just see this is opening and closing of form. So in between, you can just observe. So you have used the text box, you have used the option that is select of control unit, control buttons. Okay, so that is either submit or reset, cancel, whatever you want. You can just specify different types of input. This all comes under the form tag. So how it works, what is the syntax of each of these things we'll be discussing. So this is whatever the content you're going to write, if it is a registration form or if it is a login page, okay, where it will accept username and login, and you will be having a two buttons, submit or reset. Now for that, to get all this, you need to write the code within the form tag. You need to write within the form tag. So today we'll be just focusing on so how these forms works, and what are the attributes of this form. Okay, maybe in the next class onwards we'll be discussing more on the control elements, that is input types, different types of input we can accept. So all those things we'll be discussing. So now we'll discuss how this form element works. Okay, I'll be using form element or form structure. So a form element which is a container, that means it contains many other elements. When I use the term container, it is going to contain other elements that represent various input elements within the form as well as the plain text and almost any other HTML element. So almost all the HTML element can be included in this form tag. So it is like acting as a container. So how exactly? So here we need to discuss how forms works. Before going to the details of how to design the form, so we need to understand how form is going to work. For that we have a diagram, and this is very important question. So many times they have asked about the how forms works. So there is a small diagram. You need to explain the diagram. So I'll just explain the diagram. So always the process begins with a HTML request. So let me go to the diagram. You can just see. So this is client side and this is server side. So we consider this is you are requesting something to the server. Okay, always the process begins with a request. That's why the number is given 1. See, in the exam, no need to write the person or exactly, just you can interaction. Okay, the flow of interaction, you just specify some boxes and also the steps. Simple steps you need to explain. So always the process begins with a request for an HTML page. Okay, this is the first step. Request for an HTML page that contains some type of form on it. Okay, so you're going to request some information from the web server or from the server. So what type of information? So when you are requesting, you have to send some details or the query. So normally it will be having the complex or the simple registration form, as simple as even the search box. When you are requesting, either it will be having a registration form, you will fill all the details and you will submit. Accordingly, you will get the information from the server side. That is one case. Or else it may just have like the Google. Okay, it will be having just one search box. Okay, you will put your query and you will click on the button, submit button. Okay, based on your query, the server it is going to process the request. So here what happens if it is a registration form? I'll just go with the registration form. So the user fills out the form. This needs to be some mechanism of submitting the form to the back to the server. So whatever the data it is entered in the registration form, that is sent to the server, and also it requires to send some of the information back to the user. So this is done by submitting by clicking on the submit button. So here it requires a JavaScript for this. So the step 2, so browser returns HTML document that contains a form. Okay, so when you are sending a request, okay, so how it is going to send the request? By clicking on the submit button. So whatever the information you entered, it will be sent to the server. So this exploration of this step 1 is given in the 2. Okay, so all these details entered in the document or the registration form, it is sent to the server. So that is the second step. So what it happens in the third step? This is just requesting. Okay, so this is first requesting. When you request, you are going to get this form. Okay, it will just open example. Okay, if you are creating a email, okay, new email ID, you will just click on create email. So in that case, so that is a request. Creating new email ID is a request. Once you submit that, so the server is going to return the form. So where it contains some of these details. Okay, so where it will be asking the name, okay, and the phone number, some alternative email ID, first name, last name. So everything, all the user details it is going to accept. So what the user is going to do? So in step 3, you can just observe the user fills the form. Okay, user fills the form and submit the form. So user is going to fill the form and submit the form. So once again, when you are submitting, so this becomes the request to the server. So it is going to be the request to the server. So here most of the time interaction between the browser and the web server is controlled by HTTP protocol that you already familiar. So last time you learned computer networks in application layer. Okay. So what is HTTP protocol, hypertext transfer protocol? So how it works, how it can be used for handling the applications. Okay, I'm not going to deal in detail about this. Just remember the interaction between the browser and the web server is taken place with the help of HTTP protocol. And also whatever the form data it is filled here should be sent via standard HTTP request. And this you can just see after filling. Are you people able to view this properly? Okay, so whatever the form it is filled, so when you click on submit, so it is going to transfer this data via HTTP request. So this request is in the form of HTTP. So that is sent. So now what happens after this, after step 4? So this request is typically some type of server-side program. Okay, it will be having server-side program example PHP. Okay, so when you are sending the request, okay, by clicking on submit button, what happens to process this data? It requires some server-side script. So maybe in this subject we are going to learn the server-side script is PHP. So for what purpose we are going to use this PHP program? So it may normally include checking the validity or storing it. So this PHP program is going to check for the validity or the whatever the data it is entered to store it into the database. Okay, or resending it in a mail. Whatever the data it is entered, okay, it is going to perform particular action based on this data submitted. So at the server side there will be a PHP program. You can just see here it is available already specified in step 5. So this request is usually for some type of server side script that will process. Okay, whatever the data it is received, it is going to process the data using server side script. So here they have given example PHP. Okay, so about PHP in module 4 we are going to discuss in detail. Okay, so what is the syntax, how to create a file, how to work with this server side script. So in detail we are going to discuss. So that is object oriented PHP also. It is part of syllabus. So we'll discuss about the PHP later. So next we'll move on to, that's all. So it is going to process. If it requires to send any result back to the user, it may send, or it will process that data and store it into the database. If it is registration, once you click on submit, so whatever the detail you entered, it will be stored into the database. Okay, so this is how the simple HTML form, how it works. Okay, this diagram is very important. Just follow the step. First request is sent. Okay, what based on the request, so the server is going to send the corresponding HTML page. Okay, it returns the browser HTML document that contains whatever the request is made. So then user is going to fill the form and submit. And whatever the data it is submitted, so that is carried through the HTTP protocol request. Once it comes to the server, so it is having the server side script that is going to process the data either by storing the data into the database, it will perform particular action specified according to the code in server side script. Okay, so very simple diagram and simple explanation. Is it clear? Any doubt in this, how forms works? There are 5 steps. You need to explain those 5 steps. Okay, not in detail, just simple words, how the forms are getting work. So that is between the client and server. So that is between the user and the server. I'm just taking example of some registration form. So how it is working. And also here we are going to use JavaScript in between. That is mainly for validating. So when you are clicking on submit button, okay, so we'll use the JavaScript. So it is possible to submit the form data using some other type of mechanism. So mainly we are going to use this JavaScript at the client side for validation. Okay, maybe many of you are already aware of it. Okay, we are going to discuss about the JavaScript in the next module in detail. Module 3, JavaScript, basics of JavaScript, how to write the simple JavaScript program. So all that we are going to learn in detail. So this is how the HTML form works. In very high level or in abstract level I have explained, but if you go in detail, so we'll be discussing some of the important concept with respect to the form. So in that we'll start with the query string. So what is this query string indicates? So what is this query string indicates is, so how browser sends the data, how browser sends the data to the server. So we are just use the term, so browser, whatever the data it is entered, so that data is sent to the server. So how browser is going to send that data to the server, and that is stored at the server or it is processed at the server. Okay, so for that we need to understand query string. Okay, this is done using query string. So sending of data to the server through browser is done using query string. So the browser packages the user data input into something called query string. So whatever the data I have entered in the form, okay, in that HTML page. So now what is this query string? Is it clear? What is query string? So query string is one of the method used to send the browser data to the server. Okay, it is one of the method to send the data, browser data to the server. So now we'll just explore more on query string. Okay. So that is query string indicates how data is packed in a request, in the form of a request. So in the diagram they have given just request. No? So how this request is carried from browser to the server using query string. So how to represent this query string? So query string is a series of name value pairs. So when I tell query string, it contains a series, that means more than one name value pairs. Okay, and if it is having more than one name value pairs, so each it is separated with an ampersand character. Second important point you need to remember. So why query string? So how query string is structured? So query string is nothing but series of name value pairs, and each name value pair is separated by an ampersand. So each form element, so when I use a term form element, okay, when I use a term form element, you need to understand that input elements. So we'll be exploring in detail about all these input elements. So input elements is nothing but whatever you are getting, text box, okay, radio button, checkbox, then text area, input buttons. Okay, so all these comes under input tag, and these are all called form elements. So each form contains name attribute. Okay, so each form element, that means whatever we are specifying within the form element, so each input element it is specified within a name attribute. Okay, so it is having the name attribute which is used to define the name of the form data in the query string. Okay, so it is mainly used for defining the name of the form data in the query string. The values in the query string are data entered by the user. Okay, so I told the query string contains series of name and value pairs. So what is this name value? It is nothing but the user data entered. Okay, whatever the data entered by the user, so that is carried in the form of name value pairs. If it is just login page, so username equal to whatever the value you have given, so that is taken ampersand, then password, okay, that will be encrypted, ampersand. So still if any other details are there, so that is going to embed all the details in the form of query string. So your query string have certain rules defined by the HTTP protocol. It is having set of rules to be followed when it is sending the query string. Certain characters such as space, punctuation, symbols or foreign characters cannot be used. Okay, it is not possible to use these elements. Are you getting? Some special punctuation symbols or foreign characters cannot be used. So whenever if it is creating the query string, it won't contain all these special symbols. And how query string look like, you can just observe here. Okay, so here there is a title and country, submit button. So now enter the title and select the country. Okay, this is drop down list. So we'll be discussing how to create all these things. So when you click on submit, okay, when you click on submit, it is going to carry these two information in this query string format. This is called as query string format. Okay, when you click on, so this data is carried in the form of query string. So that is title, that is the name of the data, and what is the value of the data, it is given by the user, and next element. Okay, so and what is this where, so that is the name given to the element. Okay, whatever the input types we are using, for each of that we have to give the name. So that is okay, that is going to specified in the query string, not this is label. Okay, this is label, not this one it is going to take. So in the code, when you are specifying input type is equal to text name, you have to give the name. For every element you need to give the name. Okay, so that name plus what is the value or information it is entered by the user, so that is considered. And the next element, so I told if it is having more than one element, more than one information to be carried out in the query string, so each it is separated with an ampersand. Okay, each it is separated with an ampersand. So this is a simple example of how the query string look like, how it works. We will move on to there are two elements or two attributes to be specified in the form element. Okay, so form element, it is having two main attributes. One is called action attribute and another one is called method attribute. Okay, so what is action? So it will be like this, I think in the previous. Okay, it is not yet. Okay, we'll just go with, I'll just write it here, form. So here you will be having the method. So normally the value for method is either get or post. So I will explain what is the difference between this get and post. Either any one, either get or post. Then you will be having action. Okay, you will be having action. So in the action you need to specify the server side script. So based on this data, when you click on, so what action it has to perform. So for that there will be a server side script written. So that is in the form of like .php. Okay, something process.php. So accordingly it will execute or it will run this server side program. So we'll just discuss in detail what is this. These two are the main attributes of the form element. Don't get confused. So you are going to use these two terms along with the form tag. So that means these are all attributes of the form element. So here action attribute specifies the URL of the server side resource that will process the form data. Action, it is going to specify the path or the file name. Okay, so that is the server side resource that will process the form data. So that is specified in action attribute. Are you getting? So next we have method. So what is this method indicates? Method attribute. So method attribute specifies how query string data will be transmitted from browser to the server. Okay, so how the query string, whatever it is in the form of name value page, so how it is going to transmit from browser to the server, which method it is going to use. Okay, to specify this method we have two types, one is get and post. So we'll discuss these two in detail later. Is it clear? So what are the attributes of form element? One is attributes. Just remember that it is an attribute of forms. So here I was explaining it is not necessarily always PHP. It can be if it is a ASP.NET. Okay, the server side script if it is written in ASP.NET. So in that case, there will be a file name specified here with file name dot ASPX. In case if it is written server side script using Java server page, okay, so there will be a file name with dot .jsp, okay. So not only this, we have other type of dynamic programming, so that can be considered to process the data at server side. Okay. Okay. So shall we stop here, class? We'll discuss this get and just go through this form, understand how forms works. So in the next class, we'll discuss in detail about this method. So what's the difference between if I specify a get method? So what is the structure of data, how it is going to carry if I specify method is equal to get. If it is post, so how the data is carried from browser to the server. And also among these two, so which is the best one? So which one we need to prefer? So what is the advantage and disadvantage of get and post methods? We'll discuss in detail.